The wake was held at my parents' house, the same place where Nana had spent her final 3 years. 41 people crowded into the living room and spilled out onto the patio, sharing memories and passing around plates of food nobody really wanted to eat. I stood in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing, trying to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't have to accept another pitying hug from a distant cousin who couldn't remember my name. Then I heard my sister Vanessa's voice rise above the murmur of conversation. "Can everyone please gather in the living room? I have an announcement." My stomach dropped. I dried my hands slowly on a dish towel and walked to the doorway. Vanessa stood in front of the fireplace, positioned perfectly so everyone could see her. At 27, she'd perfected the art of commanding a room. Her black dress was designer. Her makeup was camera-ready. She looked like she was about to accept an award, not discuss our grandmother's death. "I know today is difficult for all of us," she began, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "Nana was such a special woman. She touched so many lives." Heads nodded around the room. Someone sniffled. "But I wanted to share something that brings me comfort during this painful time." Vanessa paused for dramatic effect, her hand pressed to her heart. "Before Nana passed, she told me about her trust fund. She said she was leaving it entirely to me." The room went still. "She told me she wanted someone responsible to manage her legacy. Someone who understood the value of family and tradition." Vanessa's eyes swept across the crowd. "The trust fund is worth approximately $1.2 million. And Nana wanted me to have it all." Gasps erupted around the room. Aunt Linda grabbed Uncle Rob's arm. Cousin Michelle's mouth fell open. Mom burst into tears and rushed forward to embrace Vanessa. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Eleanor knew you'd honor her memory properly." Dad beamed from his armchair, nodding with obvious pride. "That's our girl." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not because of the money, though $1.2 million was staggering, but because of the lie. The casual, confident lie that Vanessa delivered like gospel truth. "Wait," I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, strange. "Nana told you that?" Vanessa turned to look at me, her expression shifting to something that resembled sympathy. "Yes, Emma. I know this might be hard to hear, but Nana and I had a very special relationship." "Special," I repeated flatly. "We talked about everything. Her wishes, her hopes, her legacy." Vanessa tilted her head, her tone turning condescending. "I'm sorry if you feel left out, but Nana made her choice." Around the room people were nodding. Of course Vanessa would inherit everything. She was successful, beautiful, charming. She was the granddaughter everyone remembered. "What exactly did Nana say?" I asked, stepping further into the room. "About the trust fund?" Vanessa's smile tightened. "She said she wanted it to go to the granddaughter who would appreciate it most. Who would use it wisely. And that's you." "Obviously." Vanessa laughed lightly. "Emma, I don't mean to be harsh, but let's be realistic. You're a teacher. You make what, $52,000 a year? You live in a rental apartment. Nana knew I could actually manage this kind of wealth responsibly." He crept up my neck. "I make $68,000 actually. And I own my apartment." "Still." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "The point is, Nana trusted me with her legacy. I hope you can be happy for me instead of making this awkward." "How much did you say the trust was worth?" I asked. $1.2 million. Vanessa's voice was sharp now. "Why are you questioning this? Are you seriously going to cause a scene at Nana's wake?" Mom stepped forward, her face flushed. "Emma, stop it. Stop being greedy. Your grandmother made her decision." "Greedy?" The word hit me like a slap. "I'm asking a simple question." "You're embarrassing yourself," Dad said from his chair, his tone hard. "And embarrassing this family. Vanessa is trying to share something meaningful, and you're turning it into an interrogation." I looked around the room at all those faces. Some sympathetic to Vanessa, some uncomfortable, a few openly judging me. Not a single person was on my side. "Fine," I said quietly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my messages. "What are you doing?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. I typed quickly, "Need you here?" "No. Please." The response came in seconds. "On my way." 25 minutes. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and met Vanessa's eyes. "Nothing. Just texting a friend." "Typical," Vanessa muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Can't handle reality, so she runs to her phone. Laughter rippled through the room. Mean laughter. I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking. 25 minutes. I could survive 25 minutes. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa holding court, describing her plans for the money. A new condo in the city. European vacation. Maybe a car upgrade. Everyone listened with rapt attention, offering suggestions and congratulations. Nobody mentioned Nana again. The trust fund had become Vanessa's trust fund in their minds, just like that. I checked my phone. 21 minutes. Emma. I turned to find Aunt Linda in the doorway. She looked uncertain, almost apologetic. I just wanted to say, she started, then paused. Well, I'm sure Nana had her reasons. And you shouldn't feel bad. $1.2 million is a lot of responsibility. It is, I agreed. Vanessa will do wonderful things with it, I'm sure. Aunt Linda patted my arm. And I'm sure Nana left you something too. Maybe some jewelry or keepsakes. Maybe, I said. She smiled and returned to the living room. 17 minutes. I could hear Vanessa describing her vision for a charity event in Nana's honor. Something elegant, she was saying. Really befitting her legacy. I'll hire an event planner, of course. Spare no expense. Cousin Tom asked if she'd consider helping him with his student loans. Vanessa laughed and said she'd think about it. 12 minutes. Mom appeared in the kitchen, her expression stern. Emma, I think you should apologize to your sister. For what? For questioning her. For making her announcement about you. Mom crossed her arms. This is Vanessa's moment. Can't you let her have one day without your jealousy? Jealousy, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Yes. You've always been jealous of Vanessa. Ever since you were children. Mom's voice rose slightly. She's successful, she's social, she has her life together. I know that's hard for you to see, but you need to work on yourself instead of tearing her down. I set my water glass down carefully. I'm not tearing anyone down. I asked a question. You questioned her inheritance. At her grandmother's wake. Mom's face was red now. How can you be so selfish? 8 minutes. I loved Nana too, I said quietly. I was here. For 3 years I was here. We all loved her, Mom snapped. But Vanessa had a special bond with her. You need to accept that. I didn't respond. There was no point. Mom stormed back to the living room, where she immediately wrapped Vanessa in another hug. 5 minutes. I walked to the front window and looked out at the street. A black Mercedes was parking at the curb. 2 minutes early. Richard Chin stepped out of the car, carrying his leather portfolio. At 63, he'd been Nana's financial advisor for 27 years. He'd also been my advisor for the past 5 years, managing the investment account I'd built from scratch. I opened the front door before he could knock. Emma, he said gently. His eyes were kind but serious. I came as soon as I could. Thank you, I whispered. She's in the living room. Telling everyone about the trust fund. Richard's jaw tightened. I see. We walked into the living room together. The conversation died immediately. Vanessa's face went from flushed to pale in seconds. Who is this? This is Richard Chin, I said clearly. Nana's financial advisor. Dad stood up abruptly, his expression wary. What's going on? Richard set his portfolio on the coffee table and opened it with professional efficiency. I apologize for the intrusion. However, I understand there's been some confusion regarding Mrs. Eleanor Chen's trust fund distribution. There's no confusion, Vanessa said quickly. Nana left it to me. She told me so. I'm afraid that's not accurate, Miss Vanessa. Richard pulled out a stack of documents. Mrs. Chen established her trust fund in 1998. I have the complete records here, including all amendments and distributions. The room had gone completely silent. I could hear someone's watch ticking. The trust fund currently holds $1.47 million in assets, Richard continued. Municipal bonds, index funds, and a diversified stock portfolio. Mrs. Chen was very specific about the distribution of these assets. $1.47 million? Vanessa's voice cracked. I said $1.2 million. The difference is growth from the past quarter, Richard explained. Mrs. Chen was an excellent investor. He pulled out a document with an official seal. According to the trust documents which were last updated 8 months ago, the primary beneficiary is Emma Louise Chin. Someone gasped. I think it was Cousin Michelle again. Dad's face went white. Chilly white. Like all the blood had drained out of it. That's impossible, Vanessa whispered. She told me. Mrs. Chin never discussed trust fund details with you, Richard said, his tone gentle but firm. I have notes from every conversation we had regarding beneficiary discussions. Your name was never mentioned in that context. Mom found her voice. There must be a mistake. Eleanor wouldn't. Emma never even visited. Emma visited Mrs. Chin every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years, Richard interrupted. He pulled out another document. Mrs. Chin kept detailed records. Emma managed her medications, coordinated her medical care, handled her grocery shopping and provided companionship. He looked up at my parents. She also paid for the home modifications that allowed Mrs. Chin to stay here instead of moving to assisted living. The grab bars, the wheelchair ramp, the bathroom renovations. Total cost $34,000. The silence was deafening. Emma also, Richard continued, reading from Nana's notes now, listened to my stories. He learned to make my favorite soup. She watched old movies with me and didn't check her phone. She treated me like a person, not a burden. My vision blurred with tears. Vanessa visited 3 times in 3 years, Richard stated flatly. Each visit lasted less than 30 minutes. Mrs. Chin noted that Vanessa spent most of those visits on her phone or discussing her own problems. Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. Richard pulled out financial statements. The trust fund breakdown is as follows. Emma receives the full $1.47 million in investments. Vanessa receives $15,000 in cash, which Mrs. Chin specified was more than generous given the effort expended. $15,000? Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. That's insulting. Mrs. Chin also left detailed instructions, Richard said, pulling out a letter. She wanted me to read this if there was any dispute. He cleared his throat. To my family, I am of sound mind and clear judgment. Emma earned every penny of her inheritance through love, time, and sacrifice. She asked for nothing and gave everything. Vanessa earned her portion through existing. I hope she learns that family is not a performance art, and love cannot be substituted with social media posts and empty promises. The room erupted. Mom was crying, insisting there had been a mistake. Dad was shouting about getting lawyers involved. Vanessa was screaming that this wasn't fair, that she deserved more, that I had manipulated a dying old woman. Richard calmly gathered his documents. The trust is irrevocable and legally sound. All challenges will be unsuccessful and expensive. He looked directly at my parents. I should also mention that Mrs. Chin left instructions for a separate account. She had been saving $500 per month for 5 years specifically to cover any legal fees Emma might incur if the family contested the will. Dad sank back into his chair, his face ashen. The total in that legal defense fund is $31,000, Richard added. More than enough to fight any challenges you might consider. He turned to me. Emma, I'll call you tomorrow to begin the transfer process. Take your time. There's no rush. Thank you, Richard, I managed to say. He nodded once, then looked around the room with an expression of profound disappointment. Mrs. Chin was one of the wisest people I've ever known. She saw clearly who showed up and who showed off. Then he walked out, leaving chaos in his wake. Vanessa turned on me, her face twisted with rage. You manipulated her. You wormed your way in, Anne. I loved her, I said, and my voice was steady now. I showed up every week for 3 years because I wanted to, not because I expected anything. I made her soup because she liked it, not because I was building a case for inheritance. I was there, Vanessa. Where were you? I was busy. I have a career, I have a life. So do I interrupted. I teach 160 students. I sponsor 2 clubs. I grade papers until midnight most nights. But I made time. Because that's what you do for people you love. Mom stepped forward. Emma, honey, maybe we can discuss this as a family. Surely you don't need all that money. You could share with your sister. Why? The question came out harder than I intended. So she can buy a condo and take vacations? So you two can stop feeling guilty about which daughter you actually supported all these years. Dad's face flushed red. That's not fair. You forgot my 30th birthday, I said. You didn't come to my master's degree graduation because Vanessa had a work event. You've introduced me as our other daughter at least a dozen times. I looked at each of them. Nana never forgot. Not once. She remembered everything. This is about money, Vanessa spat. You're just greedy. This is about being seen, I said quietly. For 3 years I was invisible to all of you. But not to Nana. She saw me. She valued me. And yes, she left me her money. Not as payment but as validation. As proof that love and presence matter more than performance and promises. I picked up my purse from the side table. The trust fund is mine. Legally, ethically, and morally. Nana made her choice with full clarity and understanding. I'm going to honor it. Emma, wait, Mom started. No, I said. For 32 years I waited. I waited for you to notice me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered as much as Vanessa. I'm done waiting. I walked to the door. The crowd parted, some faces sympathetic, most shocked. You'll regret this. Vanessa shouted. You're going to end up alone. I paused at the door and looked back at her. She looked small suddenly. Desperate. I'd rather be alone than pretend to be less than I am so you can feel superior, I said. Nana taught me that. Then I walked out. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car. Text messages, voicemails, desperate attempts to rewrite 3 years of neglect into misunderstanding. I blocked them all. 6 weeks later, I sat in Richard's office, signing the final transfer papers. Your grandmother would be proud, he said, sliding the documents across his desk. She told me once that you were the strongest person in your family. She said you just didn't know it yet. I'm starting to, I admitted. He smiled. She also left this for you. He handed me an envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a photograph of Nana and me from 10 years ago. We were at the lake house she'd sold to pay for her care. We were both laughing, our faces lit with joy. On the back, in her careful handwriting, Emma, remember that worth is not assigned by others. It's recognized by those wise enough to see. You are always worthy. You are always enough. Build a beautiful life. Love, Nana. I folded the photo carefully and slipped it into my wallet. What will you do with it? Richard asked. The money. I thought about it. Pay off my apartment. Set up a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Maybe travel. Definitely therapy. He laughed. Sounds perfect. I stood to leave, then paused. Richard, thank you. For coming that day. For standing up for Nana's wishes. It was my honor, he said. Your grandmother was extraordinary. And so are you. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. I deleted the message without reading it and kept walking.